Up until the Thousand Year Blood War arc, it was thought that Kaname Thoiusand was one of the most loyal characters in the series. But that is until we are introduced to Jugram Haschwalth, the right arm of Yhwach, as well as holding the title of the Grand Master and leader of all Sternritter, and known for being the childhood friend of Bazz-B. In this video, I'm going to be analysing everything that there is to know about Jugram Haschwalth. He was first introduced during the Thousand Year Blood War arc, and it doesn't take long for him to leave a lasting impression on us via his iconic role within the final arc of Bleach. Now be sure to stick around until the end of the video so that you know the significance of Haschwalth's final actions before his demise, which concludes his character arc in an incredible way, giving him one of the best redemption arcs within all of Bleach. Hopefully by the end of this video you're going to understand the heart-wrenching realization that he experiences during his final moments within the manga. I'm going to be dissecting every layer of this character in order to understand the deeper themes that Kubo has woven into Haschwalth's story. So let's analyze how Haschwalth went from being a timid boy who is being abused by his creepy uncle to a man who commands respect as the powerful right-hand man of Yhwach, the leader of all Quincy. Now without further delay, this is my character analysis of Jugram Haschwalth. Before the video begins, only 12% of the people who watch my content are subscribed to the channel. If you enjoy these videos, then subscribe and stick around for more content just like this. Now let's get back to the topic of the video. Haschwalth makes his debut appearance within chapter 485 of the manga and in episode 2 of the Thousand Year Blood War arc anime. From his initial appearance, we quickly become captivated by the air of intrigue and mystery that he effortlessly exudes. Kubo is a master at creating mysterious characters who we gradually learn more about over the course of the story, and the Grand Master of the Sternritter is no exception to this. His character arc culminates into a deeply moving backstory where we learn more about his past, which reveals his relationship with Bazz-B, his childhood friend. Kubo weaves this flashback into the Thousand Year Blood War arc during their epic battle towards the end of the series, and this look into the past is pivotal for us to properly understand Haschwalth's character and the reasoning behind his actions, which is why I'll be speaking about it in detail very shortly. Yhwach's second in command dons a personalized Sternritter uniform with a hooded cloak that is stylishly lined with dark green fur. His long blonde hair that cascades over his shoulders is his most easily identifiable physical feature, adding to his youthful appearance despite him actually being over 1,000 years old. His attire has evolved quite considerably over the years, from his simple outfits like the light colored shirts that he had wore when he was younger to the standard Sternritter uniform with the Wandenreich cap and dark cape that he had worn when he had first joined Yhwach's army. After rising through the ranks and earning his position as Yhwach's second in command, his attire becomes more personalized, as it now reflects his high position as well as the overwhelming responsibility that has now been placed upon him. Overall, his physical appearance has appropriately evolved, complementing his journey and adding depth to his character with the way that Kubo visually characterizes him and others in the large roster of Bleach characters. Haschwalth has a distinctive personality. Through his interactions with Yhwach, he demonstrates his unrelenting loyalty, which also translates through to his actions, like when he had defended Yhwach's chamber from intruders and had stated that he was willing to die for his master's sake. Contrastingly, Uryu was reluctant to sacrifice for gaining more power, which had angered Haschwalth, who strongly believes in sacrificing for the sake of becoming stronger. In general, Haschwalth is a very confident and well-disciplined individual, known for his rigid set of principles that he adheres to. He demonstrates these traits when he had confronted Head Captain Shunsui during the Quincy's second invasion of the Soul Society, and he had declared that the Shinigami will now be exterminated. Funnily enough, Haschwalth's shrift B for balance is well reflected in his personality, considering how he conducts himself in a fair and pun intended, well-balanced manner. For example, he believes that if someone was lucky enough to have their life saved, then in exchange they must also be afflicted with an equivalent amount of misfortune. This is what had led to him attacking Kangdu without considering the implications of losing valuable soldiers during a pivotal war that the Quincy had needed to win. During his past, we learn about his bond with Bazz-B and how he had used to look up to him, but things had changed for him after he had joined the Sternritter. Haschwalth evolved from a timid boy to a cold, ruthless leader who is steadfast in fulfilling his duties as Yhwach's trusted right-hand man. Now, I want to spend some time focusing on the back backstory of Haschwalth, where Kubo reveals his friendship with Bazz-B and how fragments of this bond persist into the present day. Like how in chapter 681, we see that he still has Bazz-B's emblem as a reminder of their friendship, despite him outwardly appearing to have cast aside this bond. This demonstrates that he is maintaining an uptight facade, and deep down he still values his past to some extent, but he is conflicted by his present day responsibilities for Yhwach. This contrast between his outward facade and his inward emotions paints a picture of a complex character who is torn between his past and his present life. So without further delay, let's discuss what had happened in the past and how it helps us to paint a picture of Haschwalth's character arc. His past is revealed to us between chapter 631 to 634 of the manga. During his younger years, he had first encountered Bazz-B while both of them were hunting rabbits in the wild. Haschwalth was struggling while Bazz was able to easily shoot one down with his spirit weapon. He had then criticized Haschwalth's lack of skill and mastery in hunting. When he had asked for his name, Bazz-B had accidentally revealed his identity while arguing that Haschwalth should introduce himself first. The young Bazz compliments him that he is pretty sly for making him reveal his name first. He says that he has potential, but Haschwalth plays down the praise by stating that he didn't make him say his name. In actuality, Bazz had revealed it himself by accident. Haschwalth asks why he is following him, to which he reveals that he didn't think that a pitiful child like him could successfully hunt one of the rabbits, so he was watching over him. Haschwalth admits his lack of expertise, and he reveals that he is unable to even summon a Quincy bow, admitting that he is in fact pitiful. Bazz-B playfully refers to him as Yugo and reassures him by saying that this isn't true, and he himself is only able to summon a bow because he is a self-proclaimed genius, and that he isn't pitiful for not being able to properly utilize his powers. The young Haschwalth is quick to point out Bazz-B's contradiction, since he had called him pitiful first, but interestingly, Bazz reveals that nobody their age is actually able to summon a Quincy bow. He then asks if any of Haschwalth's friends can do it, but he nervously admits that he doesn't really have any friends. Despite being harsh with him earlier on, it seems as though Bazz-B quickly feels sorry for Haschwalth following his admission that he is lonesome. Interestingly, he stands up for himself by telling Bazz not to refer to him as Yugo because he doesn't like it. He also reveals that he doesn't have any parents and that he lives with his uncle. Haschwalth eventually tells Bazz to stop pestering him with questions because he needs to bring back home a rabbit. Kubo draws a panel of Haschwalth holding onto his arm, which appears to have bruise markings on it. Bazz-B notices this and gives him the rabbit that he had killed earlier on, since he was hunting in order to gloat about being a genius. Meanwhile, Haschwalth was hunting in order to eat. Bazz understands that he must be getting beaten by his uncle, and he then tosses to him an emblem with the letter B engraved on it, telling him that from now on he is his minion. He reassures him to no longer worry about what grown-ups have to say because he will take it upon himself to teach him everything that he needs to know. Bazz-B reveals his desire for the two of them to become the ultimate Quincy's. Haschwalth appears to be moved by these words as Kubo draws him with eyes that are lit up with hope, as opposed to the way that Kubo was drawing the young Haschwalth's eyes earlier on, which was with this anxiety-ridden look. Through his art, Kubo successfully conveys to us that Haschwalth in his younger years is really nervous and unconfident. After Bazz-B leaves, we hear someone call out Yugo, as Haschwalth quickly returns to being timid and unconfident. The individual who had called out to him was in fact his abusive uncle. We can deduce that Haschwalth doesn't really like him from the way that his expression had quickly changed back to that depressive look, combined with how he had told Bazz-B not to call him Yugo, which seems to be a nickname that his uncle uses for him. His uncle scolds him by reminding him that he had ordered him not to go so far out into the forest on his own. Then in an almost bipolar manner, his tone shifts, admitting to Haschwalth that he is useless without the boy if something were to have happened to him. He then refers to him as his sweet Yugo, which to me sounds like it's coming straight out of the mouth of a toxic narcissist. You only have to look at Haschwalth's expression in order to understand the extent of the abuse that he is having to endure, which appears to be physical and mental abuse. This is what has resulted in his low self-esteem at his young age, as well as explaining the injuries on his arm which Kubo had shown to us earlier. 6 months after Haschwalth and Bazz-B had first met, the small castle that Bazz-B's clan had lived within was burnt down by Yhwach. Bazz describes him to be a monster who has taken over the northern territory, but he didn't use a bow and arrow to do so, but instead with a strange power. At this time, Yhwach was said to have been alive for 200 years, and that it was rumored he was the father of all Quincy. Bazz didn't care about any of this, as he tells a young Haschwalth that they are going to kill Yhwach, but in response he sounds reluctant to join Bazz. Bazz reminds him that his forest was also burnt down by Yhwach, stating that he can either come with him or roam aimlessly with his uncle in the charred remains of their homeland. But Haschwalth reveals that his uncle had in fact died in the fire. Following this, the two of them lived off of some gold that they had dug up from the remains of the fallen castle. With that aim to kill Yhwach, they had started to train tirelessly. Neither of them had ever said it, but they had both decided to join Yhwach's forces, desiring to take him out by infiltrating his ranks. 5 years after Yhwach had attacked their home, he declares that they will be conquering the Soul Society next, and in order to do so, they will need to form a military unit called the Sternritter. During those 5 years, Bazz-B says that there was no reason for them to rest, so they laid low deep within the forest and honed their skills, training day and night. Bazz was a natural and he had quickly become proficient with his abilities, but Haschwalth on the other hand continued to struggle. Bazz narrates that he had no talent as a Quincy. Even after 5 years of training, he was unable to gather reishi or even build a simple bow. We learned that once in a few decades, a Quincy like Haschwalth is born. Historically, they were weeded out as failures, so for hundreds of years, a failed Quincy hadn't been born like him. Even the mere mention of one had become an old folks tale. Bazz had started to think that partnering with Haschwalth wouldn't bring him closer to killing Yhwach, despite the fact that Haschwalth was training harder than him in order to make up for his lack of talent. Also, for some reason, Bazz couldn't bring himself to leave Haschwalth behind. He wasn't sure if Haschwalth was aware that he was pitying him. One day, Yhwach's military police had arrived and they'd announced the formation of the Sternritter, revealing the plan to invade the Soul Society because Yhwach believes that if left unchecked, the Shinigami will eventually pose a threat to the Quincy. The selection process will be strict. Despite this, Bazz had immediately introduced himself along with the very nervous Haschwalth, stating that the two of them want to enlist into the Sternritter. He then challenges Yhwach's guard, trying to prove that he is strong enough to join the Sternritter. But before they clash, he is stunned by the arrival of Yhwach, who is sitting on the majestic Horsama. All of the surrounding Quincy seem to be held down to the ground by his incredible spiritual pressure. He has arrived to pick up something that he has been searching for. He reveals that he has come to collect the one who will become his right arm. Bazz-B believes that he is the one Yhwach is looking for, as he is still pinned to the ground, struggling to get up. Strangely enough, everyone is overwhelmed by Yhwach apart from Haschwalth, which adds to this idea that Haschwalth is in fact a special Quincy born once in 100 years. Yhwach reveals that he knows his name and declares that Haschwalth will be his right arm, much to his surprise. He states that together they are whole, and without question, Haschwalth is enlisted into the Sternritter as Yhwach's advisor. The other Quincy are just as shocked as the young Haschwalth. He thinks to himself that this is what he and Bazz had trained tirelessly for, and now he has been chosen to be the Quincy leader's right-hand man. Now Haschwalth nervously turns to Bazz, asking him what he should do, but Bazz is furious. From his perspective, they were supposed to get closer to Yhwach and kill him together. He was the talented one and Haschwalth wasn't. Even if both of them were unable to make it, then surely it would be Bazz who would be successful. This resentment that he feels towards Haschwalth forms instantaneously as he questions why Haschwalth was selected and he was not. You can see the difference in the eye expressions as Bazz's fury makes Haschwalth think, why is it that he is looking at him like that? Why isn't he happy for him? Bazz had pitied Haschwalth and kept him around, reinforcing his beliefs that he isn't talented, while Bazz had continued to progress, thinking highly of his own talent and disregarding Haschwalth, even coming to regret partnering with him in the end. When everything was said and done, the Quincy failure was selected to be the closest to Yhwach as his chosen special Quincy, and ultimately the talent of Bazz-B was outmatched by Haschwalth's unique birthright. After Yhwach gives the order to bring Haschwalth back to the castle, the young boy protests as he shamefully admits that he has no talent as a Quincy. He isn't even able to create a bow, let alone arrows. He draws Yhwach's attention to Bazz, who he states is more fitting to be by his side. Yhwach steps down from Horsama and states that his eyes have not deceived him, revealing that the young boy has yet to understand the power that he possesses. He reveals that Haschwalth is the same as him. He is a Quincy who has the power to share power with others. The leader of the Quincy admits that he had searched for a long time, because since Yhwach's birth over 200 years ago, he was unable to find another Quincy with the same power as him. Bazz-B realizes that Haschwalth is in fact the chosen one. Unlike other Quincy, he is unable to absorb reishi from his surroundings in order to turn it into power. Haschwalth was
born being able to give power to those around him. Yhwach reveals to him that he was able to gain power by learning how to bestow power upon others in order to grow it, and then take it back to become stronger. It is revealed that Haschwalth most likely has the same power as him. Yhwach tells Bazz-B that he must have felt that his power was increasing daily the more time that he had spent with Haschwalth. He ends up crushing Bazz's self-worth by questioning if he really believes that was his own power. Bazz's expression drops as he is told to thank Haschwalth for having transformed him from being powerless into a genius. Yhwach tells Haschwalth that he needs him, which lights up the young boy's eyes. For once he is finally seen to be useful and not a burden to someone. He had felt like a burden to his uncle, and then a burden to Bazz-B during those 5 years of training. Frustrated by having his beliefs crushed by the man who burnt down his home as well as his family, Bazz-B fires an arrow towards Yhwach in an attempt to kill him. But Haschwalth catches the arrow as we see a fascinating contrast. Haschwalth now appears to be cool and collected, while Bazz-B has a despair-ridden expression similar to the one that the nervous Haschwalth had 5 years ago when the two boys had first met while hunting rabbits. I absolutely love how Kubo flips the script on us and visually represents this in his art with the incredible expressions that make you feel the crushing defeat of Bazz-B and the triumphant rise of Haschwalth into his birthright. Haschwalth becomes powerful while Bazz is made out to be talentless without Haschwalth by his side. It's like he has had his purpose stripped from him and everything that he had believed about himself was a lie. Additionally, he is now alone without a home or family to return to, while Haschwalth has just been accepted as a worthy right arm to the father of all Quincy. It's an inverse of the state of these two characters when they had first met. This is a short backstory which I hope will be expanded upon within the anime, but despite this, it is still packed with emotion and subtlety. There are several tiny details that are easily missed, like Haschwalth being oppressed by his uncle, the small changes in how Kubo draws their expressions in order to represent a character with purpose and self-confidence like young Bazz-B, and one without a purpose and no self-esteem like young Haschwalth. It is just top-tier character writing, as this entire flashback is seamlessly integrated during Haschwalth's battle against Bazz-B during the final arc of the manga, and it definitely adds a lot of much needed depth and meaning to their conflict. Within chapter 634, we are shown events 3 years after Haschwalth was enlisted into the Sternritter, working his way up to captain rank, while Bazz-B had just joined the Quincy army at this time. Haschwalth tells off Bazz-B after he tries to challenge him to a fight. He warns him that infighting amongst the Sternritter is forbidden and punishable by death. It seems as though he has been challenging Haschwalth repeatedly for a duel. We learn more about the situation from comments made by Hubert, who tells Haschwalth that it must be getting tiresome having that newbie constantly trying to start something with him. He then taunts him by questioning how much respect he commands as a leader. Haschwalth responds by saying he will do better by trying to follow Vice Captain Hubert's example, leaving him pretty much speechless. Hubert notices Bazz-B behind him and threatens to beat some manners into him, but Haschwalth reminds him that infighting is punishable by death. He asks Hubert if he is willing to die for somebody like Bazz-B. Hubert tries to say that it's fine because nobody is watching, so it's not like Yhwach is going to find out, but Haschwalth sternly reminds him that he is watching. Within 3 years, we see the growth that his character has undergone. He has grown from a timid boy with low self-esteem to a leader who does in fact command respect, which is all but proven by Hubert backing off from attacking Bazz-B after Haschwalth's stern reminder. I love how the conversation between Hubert and Haschwalth begins with a taunt and it ends with Hubert just being verbally backhanded in the most elegant manner. The refusal to fight Bazz-B and the way that he had dealt with Hubert's taunting tells us everything that we need to know about Haschwalth's growth ever since becoming Yhwach's second in command. Now, we don't know much about Haschwalth's involvement during the original battle between the Quincy and the Shinigami, which had resulted in the 1000-year isolation for the Quincy. So the next time that we see Haschwalth chronologically within the story is during chapter 485, right at the start of the 1000-year Blood War arc. He is one of the cloaked soldiers who witnesses the murder of Luders and Eben after Yhwach coldly disposes of them. The concealed Haschwalth questions if he should have disposed of those two Arrancar since they are valuable soldiers who don't really require combat training, but Yhwach isn't concerned because he can enlist as many Arrancars as he wants to, explaining that Hueco Mundo is now his territory now that Tia Haribel has been imprisoned. During the following chapter, we see Haschwalth examining Eben's medallion as he reveals that there are signs that he had used it, but despite this, it seems as though Ichigo's Bankai was was not sealed by the medallion. Yhwach states that special measures will need to be employed in order to deal with Ichigo. Haschwalth confirms that they had anticipated that Ichigo's Bankai would be difficult to seal, and it's very significant that they have had this intel verified by Eben's medallion, as Yhwach realizes the impatient Eben had proved to be useful in the end. Consequently, he orders Haschwalth to contact the hunting army within Hueco in order to deliver the command for them to pick up a few more disposable Arrancar for them to use. We see Haschwalth again on the onset of the first Quincy invasion of the Soul Society within chapter 490. While Ichigo is preoccupied within Hueco, the Wandenreich seize the opportunity and prepare to launch their offensive. Haschwalth gathers immediately with the other Sternritter at the Gate of the Sun, as they are ordered to equip themselves in order to invade the Soul Society. Haschwalth is seen front and center, leading the Sternritter into battle. Following their arrival, he along with the other Sternritter emerges from the pillars of blue flames, with his hood over his head, as he very stylishly threatens the opposition, telling the Shinigami to tremble because they will now be purged by the Sternritter. We see Haschwalth again in chapter 694, where he approaches members of the 13th Division, led by the 6th seat Kajomaru, who orders him to stop, refusing to let the Quincy's second in command pass. Haschwalth can sense their fear and advises them to feel free to run away, since such weak Shinigami aren't even worth his time. Kajomaru yells at him not to mock the Gotei 13, reaffirming his resolve as he tells him to halt once more. But Haschwalth makes him realize that fear has already overwhelmed him. Subconsciously, the Shinigami has shifted his stance towards the encounter from that of life and death to just simply restraining the enemy. He reminds Kajomaru that the war has already begun, as he proceeds to effortlessly cut him down where he is standing, solidifying that he and the other Quincy's mean business and that there is no room for hesitation during a war. After taking out the 6th seat, he asks Yhwach what he would like him to do with the other Shinigami, because it seems as though the rest of them have lost their will to fight. Yhwach leaves it up to him to decide, stating that if he believes it to be better to spare their lives, then that is fine too. Judging from the fact that we see Ryunosuke in chapter 500 being informed that Ichigo is coming to help, we can deduce that Haschwalth had spared the other Shinigami who are accompanying Kajomaru. This lines up with his earlier statement that such weak Shinigami weren't even worth his time. We see Haschwalth again immediately following Asnod's battle against Byakuya, as he relays to Yhwach that it seems as though Byakuya Kuchiki has died, stating that it has taken longer than expected, to which Yhwach says that the lack of ruthlessness is the only flaw of the Sternritter. But suddenly the two of them are approached by Kinpachi Zaraki, who is carrying the bodies of 3 Sternritter over his shoulders. Haschwalth recognizes him, and in disbelief he asks how he has managed to defeat 3 Sternritter. After learning the details of how all 3 were killed, he says that he had heard about Kinpachi being a freak, but he now sees it for himself. Kinpachi states that he has no business with him as he charges towards Yhwach, leading to the two of them clashing, with Haschwalth expressing his concern for his master. In chapter 505, Haschwalth watches as Kinpachi is defeated off screen and held up by his throat just before Head Captain Yamamoto arrives in order to challenge Yhwach. During Yhwach's battle against Head Captain Yamamoto, Haschwalth watches on, concerned for his master. In chapter 507, he comments on the appearance of Yamamoto's Bankai, questioning if his Bankai really is just that small scorched sword that was left behind after the fire had burnt out. Yhwach warns him not to take it lightly because Zanka no Tachi is a Bankai that seals all of his fires into the body of the Zanpakuto. He explains his past experience with it, stating that everything that it cuts is burnt by an explosive flame, describing it as a sort of hellfire. When Yamamoto makes his Bankai's flames visible, Haschwalth deduces that at 15 million degrees, there is no way that such immense heat would be visible to the naked eye as flames. He eventually realizes that the flames emanating from Yamamoto are as a result of his overflowing spiritual pressure, which is manifesting like flames. When the real Yhwach appears following the defeat of Royd Lloyd, he kills Yamamoto and then tells Haschwalth that it's time to finish this, as he orders him to tell every member of the Sternritter to thoroughly destroy the Soul Society. Following the devastating final strike, Haschwalth and Yhwach prepare to retreat so that they can wait for the arrival of the Zero Division, but an explosion erupts in the air above them as Ichigo has just arrived within the Soul Society. In chapter 512, Haschwalth identifies Ichigo's spiritual pressure as he asks if he should get rid of him, but Yhwach declines, saying that they will leave now. now. Before their departure, Ichigo swiftly appears to confront them. Haschwalth steps forward in order to protect his master, but he is stopped by Yhwach, who determines that they have no choice but to put a stop to Ichigo here. After he is subdued, Yhwach tells Haschwalth to carry him to their castle, where he will be revived and put under their command. However, Ichigo subconsciously activates Blut Veen and continues his battle against Yhwach. Haschwalth watches the battle but comments when Yhwach's time outside of the shadows has reached its limit. He says that they have reached their limit for operating outside of the shadows, and it's now time to return to the Wandenreich city. Yhwach realizes that Aizen had manipulated his perception of time via his Kyoka Suigetsu. Haschwalth was aware of this, but had decided not to say anything, figuring that he wouldn't have been able to stop Yhwach deciding to take out Ichigo. When Ichigo attempts to stop them from leaving by charging towards them, Haschwalth within a split second intercepts the attack as he easily breaks Ichigo's Tensar Zangetsu before leaving. This is the first time that we see Yhwach's second in command participate in somewhat of a battle, and needless to say, his display of power was truly fearsome to behold. It's no small feat to break the main character's Bankai with such ease. Haschwalth appears again in chapter 537, having presumably returned from the world of the living, as he is accompanied by Uryu Ishida, who he has brought to the Wandenreich city for him to be enlisted into the Sternritter. Later, when Yhwach announces that Uryu will be his successor, Bazz-B protests but is stopped from continuing his objections by Haschwalth. Later, when Bazz-B decides to confront his leader about his decision to appoint Uryu as his successor, he is met by Haschwalth, who asks him where he is going. He states that he was under the impression that Haschwalth will be Yhwach's successor, and most of the other Sternritter would have been fine with this choice, but appointing a newcomer like Uryu is absurd. He wonders how Haschwalth doesn't have a problem with any of this, to which he states that there is no room for him to question their leader's decision. Baz calls him a coward, disappointed by his refusal to object to Yhwach's unexpected decision. He then challenges him for his seat by telling him to relinquish his position as Yhwach's right arm, considering he is willing to give it up without question to a nobody like Uryu. Haschwalth tells him to calm down, but he says that he is perfectly calm, but before the situation can escalate further, they are interrupted by Askin, who commends Baz for not having charged headfirst, reminding him that Yhwach dislikes conflict and that Pepe has been spying on them this entire time. He tells them that nothing good will come from a fight between them, especially for Haschwalth. In chapter 544, when Haschwalth returns to his chambers, an attendant is waiting for him, as she questions Yhwach's decision also, wondering if Haschwalth approves of it. He explains that it is their master's wish, because Yhwach was aware that naming Uryu as his successor will create unrest within the Sternritters. Haschwalth assumes that this was done intentionally in order to direct the scrutiny of his underlings towards Uryu. Even at this stage, doubts about Uryu's allegiance were established into the plot, with Haschwalth stating that no matter who he is, no matter the power that he possesses or what he is up to, Uryu will now struggle to make even the slightest move out of line, because all eyes are on him. His only choice now is to dedicate himself to Yhwach and his army, and this doesn't change even if Uryu has realized the true reasoning behind Yhwach's decision to make him his successor. Haschwalth, along with Yhwach and Uryu, are seen after the Serete is swapped with the Wandenreich city at the onset of the second Quincy invasion. Yhwach tells the two of them about the Quincy Emperor's song before stating that this is the last 9 days of the world. Chapter 547 sees Haschwalth confront head captain Shunsui, as he explains that they haven't invaded the Serete by breaking through their protective barrier this time or during the first invasion. He reveals that the Quincy have always been within the Serete to begin with. Shunsui thanks him for the valuable information, as he compliments the Quincy for being blessed with well-trained men, because it didn't take long for Haschwalth to reach his quarters. He proceeds to formally introduce himself to Shunsui as the aide of the Wandenreich Emperor and the Grand Master of all Sternritter. Shunsui does the same, stating that he has just been appointed as the head captain, to which he assumes that his opponents are already aware of. Haschwalth explains that this is why he had come to see him first. Shunsui taunts him by calling him impatient and wonders why he doesn't want to enjoy the war that they have waited over 1,000 years for. But Haschwalth explains that Yhwach is a lover of peace, and he believes that the shorter the battle, the better it is, and it's for this reason he had only issued one order to his underlings, which was to instantly exterminate the opposition. In chapter 551, we see Haschwalth struggle to get through a barrier placed in front of the head captain. He wonders if his his powers are being deflected or if they are being absorbed. Nanao reveals her ability Ultimate White Wall, a barrier that temporarily shuts out Quincy powers from entering. Haschwalth immediately recognizes her and asks if this is a Kido that she has created. She reveals that she was appointed as Shunsui's lieutenant based solely on her talents with Kido, and creating such a barrier is a fairly easy task for her. She tells him that it was a mistake for the Quincy to have left traces of their spiritual pressure all over the Serite following their last attack, as she explains that it was as though they were spoon-feeding the Shinigami to take precautionary measures. He seems unfazed as he asks if this highly skilled Kido barrier that she has developed can be used by the other captains as well, to which she says no, they are unable to use it. In the distance, we see the battles commencing between the Shinigami and the Quincy, as he suggests that she should have refined the technique so that it could have been taught to others, instead of just focusing on completing the technique and using it for herself. This way, the other captains would have died fighting instead of being subjected to such a brutal one-sided massacre. We see Haschwalth again in chapter 559, where he comments on the progress of the war, before he begins to clash against Shunsui. I really do hope that this is one of the exchanges that we get to see in a bit more detail during Core 2 of the 1000 Year Blood War arc anime. It would be fascinating to see these two powerhouses properly fight it out, similar to how Yhwach versus Yamamoto and Ichigo versus Yhwach was extended within Core 1. As I am about to discuss, with how the fight stands within the manga, it really is a shame that we didn't get to see Haschwalth really flex against Shunsui. He tells the head captain that it seems like they are evenly matched, to which Shunsui states that he has provided a modest analysis, as he also agrees that they seem to be at the same level of power. Haschwalth explains that this is why he has personally confronted him, explaining that their skills at present are evenly balanced, but it is his job to tilt the balance in the favor of the Wandenreich. This of course is a nod to his Shrift ability, which we are yet to see be revealed within the story. The Kido barrier created by Nanao is eventually destroyed, as Shunsui correctly deduces that he has been stealing reishi from the wall. Haschwalth confirms this, stating that he had been stealing reishi from the wall in order to make it thinner. He then compliments Nanao for her wonderful technique because it had taken him longer than he had anticipated to bypass it. In response to this, she promptly constructs a new barrier, stating that in the time that it had taken to break the last barrier, she had been working on creating a new one. He notices that this is a different wall from before, as Nanao explains that it is made up of small hexagonal plates. She asks if it appears to be weaker than the last wall. Haschwalth says that judging from the reishi bond between the hexagonal shapes, it seems to be considerably weaker, but he predicts that this weaker barrier has a trap concealed within it. Growing impatient, he raises his iconic sword in the air and resolves to use a more forceful method against them, but he is interrupted by the appearance of a Wandenreich symbol in the air behind him. He reveals that he has been ordered to return to Silburn as he excuses himself to leave. Shunsui questions whether if he is really leaving so soon, to which Haschwalth responds by demonstrating his unyielding loyalty by stating that Yhwach's orders are absolute. Haschwalth tells him that he will return as soon as he is ordered to, and Shunsui responds by stating that next time he will be waiting with some tea prepared in advance for him. In chapter 559, we are taken to Silburn, where we see the defeated Sternritters BG9 and Kangdu, with Yhwach announcing that judgment will now be made for those who had been defeated in battle. Haschwalth arrives in time as BG9 begs for both of their lives, explaining that they have only temporarily lost, and they were revived by the release of their holy forms, arguing that they can still be of use to Yhwach, who tells them that they were fortunate to have escaped death, and that they should thank their good fortune. We then cut to Haschwalth, who is about to demonstrate his Shrift ability for the very first time in the series. He states that the scale of a battle must be fair, and lives that were saved by good fortune will be removed by an equal amount of misfortune. He swings down his sword to cut down Kangdu, who reminds him of his own Shrift ability, the Iron, stating that it isn't too difficult for him to stop his blade. He goes as far as to taunt Haschwalth to cut him if he can. He refuses to be killed by anyone other than Yhwach himself. Haschwalth goes on to declare that this was his second good fortune that was bestowed upon him. He asks if Kangdu can see the scales tipping. Suddenly, the Sternritter's body is instantaneously cut down, with his iron skin ability appearing to have been bypassed by the mysterious powers of Haschwalth. It's like the blocking of Haschwalth's blade by Kangdu's iron skin has been nullified. This of course was due to Haschwalth's power, which I will definitely be explaining in more detail later on in the video, when he uses uses it again on the battlefield. Following this, we see Haschwalth confront Uryu in chapter 565. While Yhwach is sleeping, he notices Uryu trying to enter his room, as he asks him what is it that he wants, proceeding to explain that when Yhwach is asleep, he returns to being the father of the Quincy in order to conserve his strength. Haschwalth tells him that nobody is allowed to interrupt his sleep. Uryu decides to leave, but the Sternritter Grandmaster sternly reminds him that he had just asked him what he had wanted. Uryu says that he didn't know that he had to tell him what business he has with Yhwach. He also notes that Haschwalth seems different from the daytime. He explains that both he and Yhwach are the two wings of a scale. When Yhwach is asleep, he returns to being the father of the Quincy, and Haschwalth is in turn entrusted with the mask of the ruler, explaining that not only are he and Yhwach connected, but all Quincy are connected to Yhwach. Haschwalth explains that it's only right that he should know, being that he is Yhwach's successor. This confrontation is fairly tense, and judging from the way that Kubo draws both of their eyes here, it's evident that Haschwalth suspects Uryu for having ulterior motives, like he had been alluding to his personal aid earlier on. Also, Uryu seems bothered by Haschwalth's reminder about him being Yhwach's successor. He goes on to explain how Yhwach has had the power to share his soul with those around him ever since he was a child. Normally, Quincy have the ability to gather reishi from their surroundings and manipulate that reishi into their own power. However, Yhwach had the opposite power to this. He had shared his soul via physically touching others. However, he had eventually figured out a more powerful way to share his soul, via engraving letters that signify abilities directly onto the souls of others. This way, he was able to share a deeper, more powerful part of himself with others. Uryu is surprised to hear this, asking how is it that he is able to engrave the souls of others. Haschwalth explains that Uryu's soul has also been engraved, reminding him that he had drank Yhwach's blood earlier on. Taking a part of Yhwach into one's body is the engraving ritual. Uryu's facial expression reveals his shock as Haschwalth confronts him, asking what is it with the look on his face, stating that it is too late to have regrets now. He correctly assumes the motive behind Uryu enlisting into the Sternritter, telling him that he had most likely joined Yhwach's army in order to avenge the death of his mother, Kanai Katagiri, an impure Quincy who was killed when Yhwach had casted Ashwalen all those years ago. He goes on to say that Uryu had lost his chance of escaping the moment that he had joined them. Everyone who is given a part of Yhwach's soul will eventually have their powers returned to Yhwach. Pieces of Yhwach's soul were scattered throughout the Serite during the last battle with the Shinigami. The battle taking place right now is for Yhwach's successful revival. All of these Sternritter as well as the Shinigami who have come into contact with Yhwach's soul will have to offer their souls up to him when they die. No matter who dies during this battle, it will only result in Yhwach getting stronger and living longer. Haschwalth proves that he knows everything about his master by explaining that fighting is Yhwach's primary means of living. He is reliant upon absorbing the souls of others, otherwise he will eventually return to being powerless, losing the ability to see, hear or move, just like when he was first born. He tells Uryu that Yhwach will never end the battle. There is no way to escape it. Nothing changes the fact that both of them are destined to live and die for the sake of Yhwach. At the end of their discussion, he states that it is almost dawn and Yhwach will soon be waking up. Haschwalth is shown in chapter 577 reacting to Gremmy's meteorite rapidly falling from the sky as he orders several soldaten to protect Yhwach. Following this, the next time that we see him is in chapter 582 after Ichigo arrives within the Serite, as Yhwach tells Uryu and Haschwalth that it's time to begin the next phase of their plan. Yhwach tells Haschwalth to summon the key as he holds his sword out in the air above him, creating a 6-pointed symbol on the ground below them. In chapter 586, Ichigo rushes to stop Yhwach, Haschwalth and Uryu as Haschwalth offers to deal with him, but Uryu steps forward and fires an arrow towards Ichigo before he has a chance to do anything. Following a brief battle between the two of them, Uryu joins Haschwalth and Yhwach as they begin their ascent to the Soul King's palace. They are seen to arrive at the palace at the end of chapter 587. When Yhwach states that they are here, Haschwalth comments that he understands how his master must be feeling right now, referring to how Yhwach must be overjoyed having arrived at his ultimate destination, especially after all of this time. However, Yhwach asks him what he is talking about, because he doesn't feel anything in this moment after looking at this decaying gravesite that the Shinigami refer to as as the Soul King's palace. Haschwalth apologizes as they summon the Sword Art from the shadows to begin their takeover. Following the arrival of Tenjiro Kirinji, Haschwalth along with the Sword Art are seen to be overwhelmed by water from his hot springs. Haschwalth is seen once again in chapter 604 after the Schutzstaffel are revived. He explains what Ashwalen is to Uetsu Nimaya, stating that Ashwalen involves gathering the lives and powers of lower class Quincy and redistributing this power to those who need it. Those that are victims of Ashwalen will die, and those that receive its power are brought back to life but with additional power than before. Haschwalth states that this is one of Yhwach's powers. It's not just a transfer of Reishi, but a complete transfer of power. So the trees constructed by Kiryu which block Reishi are unable to stop it from happening. After Ichibei sends Yhwach flying out of the palace, we see Haschwalth call out to him, but not too long after this he returns, to which Haschwalth states that he has the power to see all that is about to take place, elaborating that anything that Yhwach has seen cannot be used to kill him, revealing that he has the letter A as his shrift and Yhwach's power is called the Almighty. At the beginning of chapter 610 he explains to Uryu that Yhwach has been fighting with his eyes closed up until now, meaning that he wasn't able to use the Almighty. Now this wasn't because he was taking the enemy lightly, but because the confined Quincy King would regain his pulse after 900 years, his mind after 90 years, and his strength after 9 years. However, if Yhwach was to have used this ability before the 9 years had passed, then it would have gone out of control, resulting in the power from all of the Sternritters being robbed from them. It is for the sake of his underlings that Yhwach didn't use the Almighty up until now, which means that the 9 years for him to regain his strength have now ended, and he is finally able to use his true power. Haschwalth announces that the time for their 1000-year prayer to be answered has finally come, after Yhwach absorbs Mimihagi and transforms into these black one-eyed creatures. Haschwalth is seen calming down the Schutzstaffel, telling them not to worry. He explains that Yhwach is releasing the Soul King's power which the Shinigami had sealed. The immense power is currently flowing through Yhwach's body. This power, represented by the one-eyed creatures, will not harm the Quincy, but it will harm the Shinigami, for they are the enemies of the Soul King. After Yhwach ends up completely absorbing the Soul King, Haschwalth is seen to inform Uryu and the Schutzstaffel that the Soul King is now gone, and from now on they are in an all-new world. They walk to the Soul King's chambers and find their leader standing with a strange black liquid leaking out of his body. He calls out to Haschwalth as he turns around, revealing 7 or more eyes on his head, which indicate he has now become the ruler of reality after having fully absorbed the Soul King. Askin is shocked and takes a step back out of fear, but Haschwalth asks him what's the matter, before advising the newly appointed Schutzstaffel member to calm down. After Yhwach demonstrates his incredible new power by destroying the upper floor of the royal palace, Askin questions how Haschwalth can remain so calm. If they fall from here, then they will all die, as he tells him to advise Yhwach to stop. Ignoring him, Haschwalth kneels before the newly powered up Yhwach, stating that he has magnificent power. Reality is only being held together by the power of Yhwach, as he requests for him to guide them, as Yhwach refers to Haschwalth as his first son, telling him to stand behind him and to follow him in this path. Haschwalth is seen to inform Yhwach at the end of chapter 628 that Ichigo and the others have arrived within the royal palace. After Yhwach tells him that Wahrwelt is the castle of the new world, Haschwalth states that they will eliminate every last one of the intruders in order to actualize the future that Yhwach envisions, exclaiming that Yhwach's vision will be fulfilled at Wahrwelt, the cornerstone of the new world. In chapter 630, Haschwalth is informed that the Schutzstaffel have been sent out in 5 different directions in order to locate and eliminate the enemy. Haschwalth asks why in 5 directions when there are only 4 Schutzstaffel, as he asks if the messenger has roped Uryu in with the Schutzstaffel, which seems to have been the case after Yhwach had ordered Uryu to join them to defend their castle. He asks about the direction that Uryu is headed towards, learning that he is making his way to the 2nd branch of the city. Because Haschwalth is unable to leave Wahrwelt, he orders the messenger to go after Uryu and to keep a close eye on him, and if he does anything outside of what he has been ordered to do, then the messenger is to report back to him immediately. Haschwalth has always had his suspicions about Uryu, with him earlier on saying that he had joined the Sternritter in order to avenge the death of his mother. It seems to have been a blunder on his part to have allowed Uryu to act alone, as he thinks to himself that he has been careless tell us, because without the Sternritter here, there is nobody to watch over Uryu. And if it's true that he has been accepted into the Schutzstaffel, then it would be easy for Uryu to act alone and be trusted with a solo mission. Something which, if you recall, Haschwalth was confident would not happen if the Sternritter were upset with him over being Yhwach's successor. Now, just as the messenger Quincy leaves to follow Uryu, he is shot through the head by none other than Bazz-B with his ability Burner Finger 1. Appearing from the shadows, Bazz-B asks if Uryu really bothers him that much. Haschwalth asks him what he is doing, but he tells him shouldn't he be asking how he is still alive. Bazz-B charges towards Haschwalth as they begin their ultimate showdown, as he attempts to fire another Burning Finger 1, but he is flipped over with his cloak obstructing his view, and he is then whacked across the head by the hilt of Haschwalth's sword. But the resourceful Bazz-B fires another Burning Finger 1 through his cloak, which manages to graze Haschwalth's head. He notes that Bazz-B's wounds were inflicted by Haschwalth and not the enemy, confirming that he wasn't chosen by Yhwach. Bazz states that not just him, but all of the other Sternritter who were left behind within the Soul Society were all hit by Haschwalth's light, explaining to him that they were all wiped out, and the ones who had managed to hide and avoid the light had ended up losing their holy forms, and those who were unable to hide from the light had lost their lives altogether. Haschwalth, in a cold manner, tells him that he has his sympathy, but rightfully Bazz-B says he must be joking. As Yhwach's second in command, he must have known that this was going to happen. Haschwalth says even if he had told him, he doubts that he would have believed him. Bazz exclaims that he would have, considering everything that they've been through in the past. Why wouldn't he have believed him? He calls him Yugo just like he had done when they were kids, but Haschwalth refers to him as Bazz-B, to which he tells him to refer to him as Bazz like he had used to before joining Yhwach. Following this bittersweet exchange, Bazz-B summons Burner Finger 2 as Haschwalth states that answering his questions won't be enough this time round. Bazz tells him that nightfall will soon set, and that's when Yhwach is asleep and their powers will be switched. Bazz-B intends to kill Yhwach's power while Haschwalth is in possession of it, as he doesn't seem to have an issue of getting rid of Haschwalth too, calling him a traitor as he thinks back to how Yhwach had invaded his homeland and burnt down his family's castle when he was a kid. He charges towards him with Burner Finger 2, but Haschwalth evades it by stepping over it, proceeding to draw his sword and to strike him from above. Bazz-B creates a spirit weapon, using it to blow a hole through a nearby wall. He asks why the name of the Quincy headquarters had changed from Sealburn to Wahrwald, but Haschwalth tells him to go outside because he doesn't want the castle to sustain any more damage from their fight. But this further irritates Bazz-B as he unleashes Burner Finger 3, transforming their surroundings into molten lava. In chapter 633, we see Haschwalth catch an arrow from Bazz-B, which must remind him of his childhood when he had similarly caught an arrow fired by him in order to eliminate Yhwach when he was younger. Kubo takes a moment to draw the expression of their eyes here, as Bazz-B's eyes express pain and sadness, while Haschwalth's eyes are drawn without a hint of fear and doubt. His eyes depict a focused but yet cold expression. Bazz-B feels envy and betrayal. Bazz-B was someone who had grown up alongside Haschwalth. He was there for him in order to make Bazz-B feel better and ultimately more confident in his own talents. However, when the truth is revealed about Haschwalth and his similarities to Yhwach, it inverts the relationship dynamic, with Bazz-B's natural born talent paling in comparison to Haschwalth, who is a once-in-a-generation special Quincy born to complement the Quincy leader. The pain in his eyes represents Bazz-B having essentially lost everything: his family, his friend, and his confidence in his own talent. The man responsible for all of this is Yhwach. At this point in the story, adding further insult, he learns that he was rejected by Yhwach and offered up as a sacrifice, something that his childhood friend was all too aware of but had failed to warn him about. This now leads to the complete breakdown of their bond. While there was some element of restraint during their past altercations, this final battle now is definitive, and there isn't any holding back. And it's for this reason that Haschwalth is seen to slash Bazz-B across the chest, dealing the first critical blow of their battle. Following this attack, Bazz-B is violently thrown back as he clenches his fist, struggling to get back up, as blood begins to pour profusely from his wound. Haschwalth tells him to stop, stating that the two of them fighting does not benefit Yhwach in the slightest. Coughing up blood, he reveals his intention to kill Yhwach as he activates Burner Finger 4, which summons a blade as an extension of his arm. He once again charges towards him, but Haschwalth, angered by his insistence to continue fighting, yells out for him to stop as he addresses him by his full name, Bazz-B, ad black. He avoids the attack with Bazz-B taunting him to come and get him, asking why is it that he is running away, questioning whether if he is afraid of losing to him. Haschwalth cuts off his right arm, leading to him unleashing his final attack, burning full fingers, which he effortlessly avoids. He delivers the final blow which cuts Bazz-B across his body. With his final ounce of strength, he grabs onto Haschwalth's collar, telling him that he has been beaten by him. He states that things didn't pan out the way that he had expected them to. He had thought that losing to him would sting a lot more, but he appears to have accepted his fate as he collapses to the ground. In chapter 635, after Yhwach kills Giselle and Lil Toto, Haschwalth arrives and speaks about how cruel Yhwach's power is to be able to see into the future. After Yhwach falls asleep, the Almighty is transferred to Haschwalth, who is seen to have 3 irises now, indicating that he is in possession of the power. After the Schutzstaffel begin defending Yhwach from the Shinigami, we see Uryu return to the castle, as Haschwalth confronts him, noting that he appears to have a lot on his mind. Uryu responds by saying that he too appears to look rather troubled himself. Haschwalth reminds him that at night, while Yhwach is asleep, their powers are switched, and being able to see into the future is a very troubling thing indeed. He asks Uryu if he agrees with the statement, hinting that his earlier suspicions about Uryu have proven to be true, after having seen how events will play out in the future. This shocks him as he asks if he has seen him become a traitor. Haschwalth plays it cool by asking why he would ask such a question, because he hasn't alluded to such a thing. However, he does reveal that he did find out that Uryu has planted a lot of chips in various areas across Yhwach. Uryu denies knowing anything about it, but Haschwalth states that he recognizes the mechanism used within the chips. They seem to function via a process by which they break down and diffuse reishi, similar to the mechanism used by the Sanrei glove which Soken Ishida had stolen from them. He asks what he was planning on doing by planting all of these chips around Yhwach. Uryu states that this is a baseless accusation, but Haschwalth continues to prove to us that his personality is totally unhinged when he is in possession of Yhwach's power. Contrastingly, he was calm and rather patient during his battle against Bazz-B, but while in the possession of the Almighty, it is like he is drunk on power. He demands that Uryu prove his innocence, drawing his sword and challenging him to a fight. He immediately strikes towards him, blowing a hole through the wall, sending Uryu flying back as he tries to avoid the attack. When Ichigo, Orihime and Chad confront Uryu, Haschwalth comments on how fate is lending Uryu a hand by giving him an opportunity to prove himself. If his claims of not being a traitor are true, then he should have no trouble with killing his friends. He ominously states that he has already seen how Uryu will respond. I love the way that Haschwalth's character behaves here. It is really refreshing compared to his usual stoic demeanor, which does eventually get very boring. This aspect of his character where he is poisoned by the power that he wields is fascinating. You can even draw parallels to his life before Yhwach, where he was oppressed by his uncle who abused his position of trust. Note that even after Haschwalth had joined Yhwach and was gifted his Shrift ability, he didn't proceed to throw his weight around. He simply followed orders to the T, doing nothing more or less than what he was ordered to do, even doing his best to avoid conflict, as demonstrated by Bazz-B's constant challenges which he had refused to entertain. However, now that he has this reality warping power, it demonstrates the corruption of power, and how an absolute power like the Almighty absolutely corrupts oneself. While Yhwach is asleep, Haschwalth is in control. Combining this position of control with the right amount of power is a perfect recipe for evil. It's interesting to see the fall of Haschwalth's character here, and its incredible setup for a redemption that Kubo admittedly tried his best to convey to us within the final portions of the arc, with it ultimately yielding mixed results, but I'll get to that very shortly. After Uryu attacks Ichigo and eventually reveals to him his plan to destroy Yhwach, Haschwalth appears once again at the end of chapter 660, reminding him that he already knows what Uryu will do in the future. Uryu tells Ichigo to take out Yhwach while he is asleep and that he will stay behind and deal with Haschwalth, but the Sternritter Grandmaster has decided to defeat Uryu before Yhwach wakes up. Also, he sees no reason to chase after Ichigo and the others because he has already foreseen their deaths. Uryu asks him if a future that has yet to happen can still be changed. Haschwalth is surprised by Uryu's change in demeanor because he appears to be a different person now that he has dropped this facade, because it seems like he is full of hope. Uryu confirms his suspicions about the future being changeable by noting that Haschwalth was in fact surprised by his sense of hope, which was something he had not been able to foresee. Uryu exclaims that the power he wields is far from almighty, indicating that he lacks the experience to be able to use the almighty to its fullest potential. They then proceed to draw their weapons, ready to begin one of the key final decisive battles of the 1000-year Blood War arc. Much to the disappointment of a lot of fans, including myself, this highly anticipated battle between two high-ranking Quincy's occurs off-screen for the most part. We do cut back to it occasionally, but it's evident that pacing becomes a huge issue, which leads to the fight feeling rushed within the manga, and ultimately lacking the payoff that we were all expecting. In chapter 672, we see that it is morning, and Yhwach has awakened with his powers being returned to him. Uryu tells Haschwalth that he must be disappointed that he was unable to defeat him before dawn, but we see a heavily injured Uryu who seems to have really been beaten up off screen. Haschwalth states that all he sees is a bloody beast fighting for its life. Uryu says that he has never been compared to a beast before, but he likes it because it makes him sound fearless. Haschwalth states that he didn't intend on defeating him before dawn, because his own ability to balance is more suited against Uryu rather than Yhwach's the Almighty. He intends to punish Uryu for the error of his ways as he fires a wave of energy generated from his sword towards him. At the end of chapter 674, we see Haschwalth walking towards a collapsed Uryu as he states that everyone walks on a balance, stating that we move forward as we weigh up everything that we come across in life on a balance. We sort what is right and wrong for ourselves, with these sorted pieces of right and wrong piling on top of one another, and this eventually gives rise to who we are as people. Haschwalth states that Uryu has done the same, but he struggles to see who Uryu is from the choices that he has made, asking if he really wants to risk his life for the sake of humanity. Uryu struggles to stand back up, telling him that he talks too much. He begins to summon a new bow to continue fighting with, as he reveals that he will find out who he is after he has defeated Yhwach and his army. He aims the bow towards Haschwalth as he questions why is it that he wants to know what kind of person he is. He can't imagine that the Sternritter Grandmaster would be too interested in the matter, going on to state that Haschwalth must have realized his true motive, because their fight was to buy enough time for Ichigo to get to Yhwach. Instead of asking him all of these questions, shouldn't he be taking him out as quickly as possible so that he can rush to protect Yhwach? Haschwalth says that he doesn't like repeating himself, because he has already seen what will happen. Ichigo and the others will die. This remains unchanged, and no matter how long he prolongs his encounter with Uryu, Yhwach will never be exposed to danger with the power that he now wields. Uryu once again alludes to the possibility of a fixed future being changed, like how Haschwalth didn't anticipate the changes in Uryu's resolve during their battle. Haschwalth agrees, but reveals that the power he wielded was borrowed and thus limited in its usage. However, not for Yhwach, stating that the true power of the Almighty is not to see the future. He states that he will reveal to him its true power once their fight is over. He then orders him to put all that he is onto the balance, his broken balance, which points to the path of no return, a hint that Haschwalth is about to unleash his very own shrift ability. In chapter 679, he tells Uryu that his shrift is B for the balance. He allocates the misfortune that happens to him to the fortunate, and this is how he is able to maintain harmony within the world. All of the misfortunes that occur to him are received by his sacrifice shield. He tells Uryu, who is stumbling around heavily injured following their off-screen bout, that he doesn't stand a chance. Before Haschwalth can end their fight, Uryu asks him if he wants to see his shrift ability, but Haschwalth doesn't seem interested, stating that if it was enough to beat him, then he would have used it already. The beaten Uryu says that now in fact is the best time for him to use his shrift, which is A for antithesis, as all of the injuries that Uryu had sustained are now sent to Haschwalth's body. His shrift allows him to reverse events that have already transpired between two designated points. On this occasion, he had reversed their physical states by transferring his wounds onto his opponent. Haschwalth compliments his power, calling it magnificent, stating that he understands now why Yhwach had taken an interest in him. With the power to reverse events that have taken place, Uryu is the only one who is able to challenge the powers of the Almighty. After revealing this, Haschwalth laughs, feeling content with his decision to have held back Uryu from confronting Yhwach. Uryu then rushes to help Ichigo, but the injured Haschwalth gets up, refusing to let him just leave. He says says that while the antithesis is remarkable, it does not match up well with his own shrift, the balance, as Uryu collapses to the ground once again, sustaining the very injuries he had just given to Haschwalth. He reminds him that any misfortune that occurs to him is received by his shield. Uryu's good fortune as a result of his wounds being transferred has resulted in an equal amount of misfortune befalling him thanks to the balance. Also, the wounds he had sustained thanks to the antithesis have also been transferred to his sacrifice shield, healing him completely, and those wounds have now been transferred to Uryu, resulting in him sustaining twice the amount of injury than he had before. Haschwalth reminds him that he doesn't stand a chance, but Uryu continues to crawl forward. He notes that Uryu is very similar to the foolish humans that he is trying to protect. Haschwalth raises his sword about to deliver the final blow, but Uryu manages to dodge his decisive attack. Haschwalth is surprised that he can still move, but Uryu reveals that he typically remains calm and he makes decisions based upon the same principles as Haschwalth's philosophy on balance. But Ichigo is unable to do that. He is the type of person to help others without thinking it through. He says that Chad and Orihime are also like this, and so are Rukia and Renji. He tells him that if he appears to be similar to them, then that makes him feel happy. But Haschwalth tells him that he wasn't questioning how he was feeling, but rather allying himself with Ichigo and the others doesn't benefit him in the slightest. He asks if he has grown by being with them. Compare it to the few moments that he has spent with Yhwach, which has resulted in him acquiring incredible power compared to the years that he has spent with his friends, which in fact has resulted in nothing of benefit. Haschwalth states that if friends are there to heighten one another, then it isn't Ichigo and the others that he should be relying on, but rather Yhwach. Uryu reminds him that it was he who had said that balance is a choice, and he has chosen to be with them. There is no self-interest here. There is nothing to be right or wrong about, because they are unconditionally friends. This sentiment angers Haschwalth, who must surely be reminded of how he had turned on Bazz-B after Yhwach had come onto the scene, and had told him about how special he was. It had resulted in Haschwalth forsaking a flawed but ultimately true friendship in the pursuit for a misguided sense of loyalty to the leader of the Quincy, who we now learn he was only following because it benefited him in some way. Haschwalth says that he understands now that Uryu has no intention of forsaking anything, despite the fact that Yhwach had accepted him. Haschwalth exclaims that he will now repay Yhwach's kindness by forsaking his life. As he is about to deliver the final blow, Haschwalth is enveloped by the light of Aswalen, causing him to fall down to his knees, as Uryu wonders what on earth is going on. In chapter 681, Haschwalth's final appearance within the manga, we see him collapse as he looks at a concerned Uryu, asking him why he is looking at him like that, asking if he is thinking that he is disappointed by Yhwach robbing him of his power, as he reveals that he feels the opposite. He is in fact honored that he had taken his power and not Uryu's. Even in his final moments, he is glad that he could have been of service to him. As Uryu leaves to confront Yhwach, he tells him to transfer his wounds to him before he goes. He explains that he is going to die soon, and no amount of wounds that he is going to now sustain will change his fate. Haschwalth reminds him that he had told him to place everything on a balance. Decisions made quickly, in doubt, without weighing them on a balance, will always end in regret. He says this as he thinks back to when he had first met Yhwach and was granted power by him. He tells Uryu to go and help Ichigo. Haschwalth's final scene within the manga is an inner monologue, where he says that even if the result will not change by having Uryu go to help Ichigo, the whole point of this is that Uryu had made the decision to go and help Ichigo because this is what he had wanted to do, resulting in Uryu moving forward thanks to his own choices. Comparatively, Haschwalth has no regrets about following Yhwach. After all, he had decided to gain power from Yhwach, as well as following him and being of service to him. In the end, Haschwalth was the most loyal subordinate to the Quincy King, and he had felt honored even after he was betrayed by him. He just wanted to be of service to the man who had given him power and had helped him overcome his issues of low self-esteem and self-doubt. Haschwalth is one of the most fascinating characters to feature within the 1000-Year Blood War arc. He not only has an incredible character design and motive, but his backstory with Bazz-B really humanizes him, making us appreciate that he isn't just the cold-hearted, ruthless leader of the Sternritter. People tend to disagree with Haschwalth's decision to eliminate Bazz-B, but Haschwalth as a child was a timid and unconfident boy. He was being abused by his uncle, so he was ultimately grateful for Bazz for letting him have the rabbit that he was struggling to hunt down. It is through the expression that is depicted in his eyes that you can appreciate how grateful Haschwalth was in that moment for Bazz-B's kindness, or I guess even pity. Eventually they end up becoming friends, and Bazz-B had formed his desire to kill Yhwach, but Haschwalth had no interest in this goal, but he was expected to share in the goal because he was friends with Bazz-B. While Bazz was devastated to lose his family to the fire created by Yhwach, Haschwalth had lost his abusive uncle, which I'm pretty sure that he had felt happy about and even grateful to Yhwach for. It's an interesting contrast that exists between these two friends, and it helps to explain their later actions. Haschwalth trained with Bazz-B for those 5 years because he was his only friend. He had nowhere else to go, so it's evident that he wasn't committed to the idea of revenge against Yhwach, but nonetheless had still trained as hard as he could to be of use to his friend, even though he just wasn't a powerful Quincy. When Haschwalth was picked by Yhwach to be his right-hand man, he had turned to look at Bazz-B for advice on what he should do, only for him to be greeted by a look of pure envy. Even here, Haschwalth had the courage to advise Yhwach to take Bazz-B instead, but this wasn't even seen or appreciated by Bazz-B, who continued to hold this resentment towards Haschwalth. He never really understood him, and from that point forward, hated him for abandoning him and never really thinking about what was best for his friend. I said it before, but Bazz-B literally kept Haschwalth around as a pick-me-up. He felt better comparing himself to him, knowing that whatever may happen, he will never be as talentless or powerless as his supposed friend Haschwalth. He eventually gained his acceptance from Yhwach, which we learned was conditional when his powers were taken away from him at the end of the Thousand Year Blood War arc. But despite this, Haschwalth was happy to be of service to the Quincy leader. When he was younger, Yhwach had told him that he needed him. This was the first time that I'm assuming that he had ever felt wanted by anyone, and this is what had resulted in the formation of his unwavering loyalty for Yhwach. So I don't think it's right to say that Haschwalth had betrayed Bazz-B. Things were a bit more complicated than that. He had tried to remain friends with Bazz-B despite becoming colder as an adult. He avoided escalating his confrontations with Bazz, who continuously was taunting and provoking him. Haschwalth even defended him when Hubert was about to attack him. He only fought Bazz-B in the end when he felt that Yhwach's life was going to be threatened. He tried to make him back down during their fight, but in the end, Haschwalth was left with no choice but to give Bazz-B what he had wanted, which was a fight to the death. In the end, Haschwalth died realizing that he spent his life following others and never really having any proper direction to make his own choices. This is why Uryu's character is the perfect foil for Haschwalth, serving to perfectly tie together the loose ends of his character arc. Uryu is a Quincy who is self-assured, who knows what he wants and has come to accept the differences between himself and the others around him. And despite those differences, he didn't mind being referred to as being similar to his rival Ichigo. Haschwalth's first decision that he had made for himself was telling Uryu to transfer his wounds to him. It was a beautiful way to show that he was no longer serving Yhwach in that moment, and he genuinely wanted to help Uryu even if it didn't change the final outcome. He took back control over his life in the end and was no longer following an abusive uncle, a flawed friendship via Bazz-B, and lastly the Quincy leader who he had felt indebted to because he had made him feel wanted and had given him power. Now I do have an entire video on my channel where I have broken down and analysed Haschwalth's Shrift, the Balance, which is easily one of the most fascinating Quincy abilities that we have seen in Bleach. So if you've enjoyed this deep dive into Haschwalth's character, then be sure to check out that video too. The final battle between Uryu and Haschwalth was underpinned by a lot of contrasting themes and key moments for growth for Haschwalth's character. It is really a shame that this wasn't explored in detail within the manga, and it really takes some piecing together to understand Haschwalth's final state at the end of the arc, and I'm fairly confident that a lot of this was overlooked by most people who read these final chapters of the Bleach manga. A lot of fans, including myself, were left unsatisfied by how several fights were rushed to their conclusion, with most of the conflicts occurring off-screen at the end of the Thousand Year Blood War arc. Uryu vs Haschwalth had fallen victim to this fast pacing and missing most of the key moments of the fight in order for Kubo to deliver to us a rushed end to Haschwalth's character, which, while it does make sense, really does need more time for it to be given the respect that it truly deserves. Haschwalth's character arc was set up incredibly with his backstory with Bazz-B, and it's a shame that we didn't see his character get enough time in the end to have his final moment of redemption properly explored and explained to us. We know that the Bleach Thousand Year Blood War arc anime is extending several scenes from the manga, and I'm confident that Haschwalth's fight against Bazz-B and Uryu will be expanded upon. And I'm also certain that there may be room for his backstory to be given some added context. Finally, we've reached the point of the video where I hand over the discussion to all of you. What do you think about the character of Jugram Haschwalth? Did you learn anything new about him via this in-depth exploration of his role within the manga? I really cannot wait to read all of your comments, and let me know what other Sternritter or Bleach characters you want me to do an analysis video on next. As always, thank you for making it to the end of this video, and I cannot wait to see you in my next Bleach video.
If you enjoy my content, then you can support my channel through Patreon for as little as $1 a month, or even through YouTube by becoming a channel member. You will gain access to exclusive channel perks and a Discord server which I frequently use. So become a member of my Zero Division and be the first to know about my upcoming videos. And once again, thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.